Mayor Marianne Meed Ward was elected as the 29th Mayor of Burlington, Ontario in October 2018. She is also the second woman to hold that position in Burlington's history. On her path to becoming mayor, Marianne served as Burlington's city councilor for 2 consecutive terms from 2010 to 2018. Prior to her career in politics, Mary Ann worked for 22 years as a journalist for clients including the Toronto Sun, Vision TV, CBC, CHCH News, Chatelaine, Ryerson University, and more. Committed to keeping people informed about the issues and information that impacts their lives. Mayor Meed Ward is working hand in hand with Burlington City Council, leadership team, and staff. Mayor Meed Ward is committed to responsible spending while still investing in infrastructure improvements, transit, and tree planting. Mayor Meed Ward and City Council have already implemented several measures to protect Burlington's environment, including a private tree protection bylaw and the declaration of a climate emergency. She became board member of the Large Urban Caucus of the Association of Municipalities of Ontario in August of 2020, where during her 2-year term, she will help to advocate on issues of shared importance for large urban municipalities. Through initiatives like the Mayor's Red Tape Red Carpet Task Force, she has led the city in partnering with local businesses to identify and remove the challenges to business expansion and attraction. In her commitment to responsible future growth and development in Burlington, she is partnering on initiatives that will ensure growth happens in the right places and at the right scale to align with the community vision. Mayor Meed Ward lives in Burlington with her husband, 3 children, and their Wheaton Terrier, Boston.
Everyone, I'm Burlington Mayor Marianne Meed Ward, and I'm delighted to answer some of your questions about leading in a time of COVID-19. I started in 2010 as the city councilor for downtown Burlington Ward 2, where I live, and did that for 2 terms, and then ran to be mayor. So I've done that for 2 years, and it's a world of difference being mayor than being councilor. And I would say it's really the nature of the issues that you deal with and the fact that you're on a much bigger stage, and bigger even than your own city. So you still make the decisions in the city, you attend committee meetings, decisions like funding transit, funding community centers and parks, determining where growth goes in the city, official plan. We just finished a new official plan for the city of Burlington. So you make all of those decisions. I do a lot less constituent work. The ward councillors in the city tend to handle most of those more local issues. I focus on citywide issues, but I also do a lot of intergovernmental relations, and that means advocating to the federal or provincial governments, more provincial since our issues are very close together. But it is a lot of advocating, lobbying, learning about those issues, and talking to my other fellow mayors across Ontario. I'm part of the Large Urban Caucus of the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, and I'm part of the Ontario Big City Mayors Caucus. And throughout COVID especially, we have been in regular contact with the province and the federal government around funding for municipalities, around regulations, safe restart, all of those issues. So that has really become, managing the emergency has become a full-time job. And it's very different than what I expected. And as I said, the constituent work is done by most of my team. I have a team of 4 people in my office, an executive administrator who handles my scheduling and does some constituent work, chief of staff, digital and media specialist who handles my communications, and we have a university intern who does policy work and everything else that we need done. So it's an incredible role, a role of huge privilege, and I'm lucky to be doing it. Challenges, and this has really changed dramatically in COVID, is that whatever decision you make, you will have half the public supporting that and half the public not. And that is new. That is unusual. For the 8 years that I was a city councillor, I could pretty much count on vast majority of constituents supporting the decisions. I was regularly in touch with them. I ran on a platform that they voted me in on and supported and delivered that. And so it really, there was a lot more, I would say, compatibility with what the public was feeling on any given day, on any decision that we were making. I knew, because I was in regular touch with my community, that they would support it, and that was representative and reflective of their wishes. With COVID, that everything has changed, and because there's no rule book for the community either. And so that's a huge challenge, that you have to simply make a decision knowing that you're running about 50-50 support or not. There are some exceptions to that. So most recently, when myself and a group of other Halton mayors and regional chair wrote to the premier and said, look, we don't think the health indicators warrant closing our economy, rolling us back to stage 2. Be targeted in your closures, base it on solid health evidence. We don't think we have the same indicators health wise as the other hotspots, and they agreed with us. And that decision has proven to be overwhelmingly supported by businesses and residents alike, many of whom are actually workers in those businesses. So that saved their jobs as well. So that was nice to have that support, but you don't always have that. And the other, I would say, enormous challenge is social media. It is a great tool for communication, but likewise, it's a tool that has been used and misused to spread misinformation, hatred, and just really disrespectful, dehumanizing in some ways commentary. And so you have to you have to shut it off sometimes and not let it get to you, because and it's really gotten worse, because people, I've never seen the community be so angry and frustrated, understandably. This pandemic has upended our world, and sometimes they'll take that out on each other, take that out on their elected officials. And so you have to really have a small diet of that, and not take it personally, and move on and make the best decision that you can. So governing in these times is extremely challenging. As I said earlier, there's no roadmap. You are trying to figure it out and do the best you can every single day. And you're under significant pressure and scrutiny from your community. And people don't agree. There's no consensus on how to do this right. What helps me is my husband and my family. They have supported my journey as an elected official since I began. They have been willing to share my time with me in the community, and sometimes they don't see me very much, especially now in COVID, where really it's 2 full-time jobs. It's being mayor and the regular business of the city, and then on the side managing the pandemic. And there are times when I work through weekends and evenings, and they're my biggest supporters and biggest fans. And so I always have a safe place to come home to. Although I'm always home, it's really a safe place to go from this room where I'm working to the next room in the house. We all are working remotely. So that's number one. I know that I couldn't do this job without the support of my family and their encouragement and their understanding. And I have a great team of people to work with. We trust each other, we support each other, we lean on each other when it gets tough. And we also, all of us, have a very unique and good sense of humor. So you have to learn to laugh at some of the little things. We have dark humor sometimes, but it keeps us going. And we don't take what is happening personally. You can't. And that's easier said than done, because if somebody's coming at you with a very personal negative attack, it takes you a minute to kind of switch gears and say, that's not about me, that's about the kind of day that person is having, and have some empathy and compassion for how tough it must be for that person to be lashing out like that, and then move on. and not let it define who you are. So you really need a good support of people around you, and find ways to really turn off and dial down. I can't do it very much. I can only do it for very short periods of time because, as I said, things can change in a matter of hours. So I'm really right now tied to my phone, but there are periods where you just have to put it aside for a minute and let other folks step in and reach out to you if there's an absolute emergency. It has really changed everything, and you learn that you have to make decisions extremely quickly, sometimes in a matter of hours. Your day can be upended very easily, whatever you thought you might have been doing that day. If something changes, a new regulation from the province, something happens in the community, an outbreak, and all of a sudden you are having to deal with that either through communication or through new legislation or bylaws, and it is and there's no roadmap for this. So you have to be courageous. You have to be willing to make decisions quickly, even though you may not feel you have all the information, and truly you don't. There's no roadmap for a pandemic. We've never been in this, any of us, before. And so you have to sort of trust what your gut is telling you, listen to your medical officers of health, work with your colleagues, make the best decision you can, and not be afraid to say, that didn't work, we need to change it, apologize, and move on. So a healthy dose of humility. You can't count on sleeping much in this role, and speed. And the other thing I think that's really changed is we get compared not just to our peers next door geographically to us in Ontario or in Halton, but around the world. So because there's social media and people can get information about what is happening around the world, we are held to a different standard, global standard really, and something that is quite new in my 10 years on council. It used to be that people might compare us to Hamilton or Toronto or what's happening in Mississauga or some other Halton municipalities. Now, especially with the pandemic, people are seeing what's happening globally and bringing those ideas and saying, why can't we do this here? So it's good, actually. It ups all of our game, and it requires us to have a different focus. You have to learn to follow your instincts, and that's, again, easier said than done. There were times throughout the pandemic where little red flags were going up about something we were about to do, and when I've trusted those and leaned into those, the right decision was made. Where I've kind of pushed it aside and allowed myself to, kind of be guided by the views of others, and kind of ignoring my own instincts. Those were the times where we had to change gear and apologize and move forward and make a different decision. And so you have to, don't give up your voice. And I think a lot of us as women have been trained to kind of defer and, almost apologize for having a strong opinion and back down in the face of somebody saying that that's not the right thing. And we have to, I think, be willing to be more courageous in standing our ground politely, respectfully, and listening to that, those different perspectives, but not walking away from our view so easily when somebody else doesn't quite share it. Being willing to take it another step and say, well, just bear with me. I think there might be something more to this, and really talk it through. So that's been, that's been something that I have learned through this, is to, my instincts are pretty good, and that's because I am in touch with the community, and really at the heart of that has to be what guides you and your principles. Those principles will determine whether you can trust your instincts. And if your principles are wanting to help the community and putting them first, and really stripping your own ego out of it, then your instincts can be trusted. So that's one thing, and not being afraid to reach out and ask. So it may seem like contradictory, but I learned from my fellow mayors across Ontario. I've had the privilege of working much more closely with them through the pandemic. So leaning on them, listening to them, while also being willing to say, well, actually, I see it a little differently, and respect that there may be differences of opinion, and respecting my own opinion. Characteristics that have always been there. So I've always been a compassionate leader, a humble leader, somebody who does listen and seek the counsel of others, and those have always been qualities, but those are absolutely essential in moving forward, managing the pandemic. Not being afraid to apologize if you feel like the wrong decision was made, and not worry about that. We're not going to get this perfect, any of us. There is no roadmap for a pandemic. So if you are making the right decision for the right reasons, and you're guided by public health and safety, job number one, then you made the best decision you could at that time. So that is really important. The value of collaboration with other levels of government, that's been a really nice silver lining coming out of this. Much stronger relationships with the members of provincial parliament and federal parliament here in Halton and in Burlington. Very close working relationships with fellow mayors, with ministers in the province who are making some of these big decisions, and to see that collaboration and welcome that dialogue in a respectful manner. I really hope that can continue post-COVID, and I think it will. Some of the relationships that have been built and forged through these tough times are solid, and they will continue through COVID-19 and beyond, whatever the next stage of this is about. And learning to pace yourself, that's always been tough for me. I love what I do, I always have, and so carving out that non-work personal time to recharge and regenerate is so critical. And that's probably my Achilles heel, is I don't do enough of that, but I've started to do more. So that's good. And others around me have said, you must take this time every now and again to recharge. So that's really nice to have those folks who are looking out for me, not just as a fellow employee on the journey of COVID, but as a friend and as someone who cares about my overall well-being as well. I've always been a very practical leader, and I think the most helpful piece of advice I can give is, if something is not working, come up with a suggestion to do it differently. And I have been so inspired, not only by elected officials, but also by businesses throughout Halton, where they would say, look, don't close us down. That will, some of us may just not even survive that. But here's some ideas for regulation that you could put in place, or things that we are already voluntarily doing to keep our staff and our customers safe, and maybe put that into some standard regulations or guidelines. And so the ability to, if you say no to one thing, say yes to something else. If that's not going to work, come up with a suggestion or a solution or an idea, and be willing to kind of workshop that idea with others in light of their feedback. The original idea may not be the exact right one, but through the dialogue with others, it becomes this iterative, creative process where you actually end up landing on the best solution, and it may be very different from the original ideas brought forward. So that's who I've always been, as a problem solver, not a problem identifier. So there's kind of those two types of people. People can tell you what the problems are, and people who look to solve any challenge and actually get energized by that process of seeing a problem and saying, look, we can figure this out. So that has been an essential quality throughout COVID, because we know what the problems are, but we, from the beginning, have had to move past identifying those problems to identifying how we're going to keep people safe and live with and really coexist with COVID, as we have been for the last 8 months, and likely will be for months and years to come. For watching, thanks to the great questions from Hitu. It's always nice to kind of be able to sit back and reflect and listen and learn, and realize that I've learned a great deal throughout these challenging times. And so thank you for your interest, and I hope it was helpful for everybody.
Thank you for watching. Remember to like and share. Please visit hitu-hrsolutions.com for more leadership interviews.